Darius Webb was 38 years old, and for 6 years he believed he had built something real. He managed a hospital system by day, ran his household with quiet precision, and loved his wife the way his aunt taught him, through action, not performance. Every second weekend of the month, Adrienne packed her bag for another client activation. Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte. He never questioned it. He packed her bag for her. That was the kind of man Darius was. The kind his wife told her friends had no ambition. The kind she called comfortable being average, not knowing he was listening from the hallway. One Friday evening in Charlotte, sitting alone at a hotel bar he was never supposed to be in, Darius watched his wife walk through the lobby in the dress she had been saving for their anniversary. She was not alone. And when the second man arrived and she made room without flinching, something permanent shifted inside him. He put $40 on the bar. He did not cause a scene. What Darius Webb did next would cost 3 people everything they had spent years building, but none of them saw it coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The table was already set by 6 o'clock. Darius Webb moved through the kitchen the way he moved through everything. Steady, quiet, no wasted motion. He folded the napkins into neat triangles and placed them beneath the forks. He adjusted a glass that was already straight. He lifted the lid on the pot, stirred twice, and replaced it without making a sound. The house smelled like garlic and something warm. A jazz station played low from the countertop radio. Nothing he had to think about, just sound to fill the corners of a room that was otherwise very still. He checked the clock. 6:10. Adrienne would be home by 6:30. He went to the bedroom. Her travel bag sat open on the chair in the corner. The gray rolling carry-on she used for short trips. She'd mentioned it that morning between bites of toast, not really talking to him so much as thinking out loud. I need to pack tonight. Charlotte again. Flight's at 7:15. He hadn't said much. Just nodded, finished his coffee. But sometime between dropping the dishes in the sink and backing out of the driveway, he'd made a mental list. Her travel-sized toiletries from the bathroom cabinet, the folded blazer she always forgot, the phone charger she always lost. He packed it all with the kind of care that didn't ask to be acknowledged. He zipped the bag and set it beside the door. That was Darius. That had always been Darius. He'd grown up with nothing. And he meant nothing in the real specific way people who have actually had it mean. Memphis in the 90s, East Side, a house where the heat worked sometimes and the refrigerator was a negotiation. His mother got sick early. Aunt Phyllis stepped in, a retired school teacher with a sharp tongue and a steady hand, who taught him that a man's worth showed up in what he did when no one was watching. So he watched himself. He kept things tight. He put himself through a technical program on a scholarship and a second job, worked his way up through hospital operations, and earned the title of senior facilities manager at 34 without anyone handing him a single step of it. He knew how systems worked, how to find the weak points before they cracked, how to keep things running so smoothly that nobody noticed they could have broken. He applied that same precision to his home, to his marriage. He was good at it. He had believed, for 6 years, that being good at it was enough. Adrienne came through the door at 6:38, her bag over one shoulder and her phone already in her hand. She smelled like the office, warm paper, and someone else's perfume from a shared elevator. "Hey," she said, not quite looking at him. "Hey." He was stirring the pot again. "Food's ready when you are." She dropped her work bag by the couch, noticed the packed carry-on by the door, and said, "Oh, you packed it." It wasn't gratitude exactly. It was more like a box being checked. She was already scrolling. "Blazer's in there too," he said. "And the phone brick, the long one." Thanks." They ate at the table he had set. Adrienne ate with her fork in one hand and her phone flat on the table, screen up, glancing down every few bites. She ate quickly, not because she was hungry, but because she had somewhere else to be in her head. She told him, between scrolls, that the Charlotte activation had a new venue contact, that her team was behind on deliverables, that she was exhausted already, and she hadn't even left yet. He listened, asked a question here and there, kept his eyes on her the way he always did, steady and warm and slightly too patient for a man who didn't notice things. But Darius noticed things. That was the whole of him. He noticed she'd used the good perfume this morning, the one she kept on the second shelf. He hadn't said anything about it, because there was nothing to say. Not yet. Not with only a feeling and a scent, and the faint, unfamiliar pressure behind his sternum that he couldn't name. She kissed him on the cheek before she went to bed. Not the mouth. The cheek. Patted his arm and said she'd text him from the airport. He said, "Sleep well." Now it was past midnight. The house was dark and quiet. Adrienne was asleep beside him, her breath slow and even, her face soft and unreadable in the dark. She looked like she always did in sleep, like the woman he had married. He remembered the proposal. He'd saved for almost a year, picking up overtime, cutting what little he spent on himself. The ring wasn't big, but it was real, and it was paid for. And when he slid it across the table at the restaurant, her eyes had filled up fast. She'd cried. He'd been certain, the way a man who has survived uncertainty his whole life is certain when he finally feels solid ground beneath him. He'd been certain. Now he stared at the ceiling. Walter's voice came back to him. Just a question. Nothing more. Tossed out easy over the rim of a beer bottle last Friday. You ever notice how she always goes alone? Even when it's the same city twice? Darius had laughed it off in the moment. Changed the subject. But the question had followed him home. And it was here now, in the dark, sitting on his chest, where the certainty used to be. He looked at the ceiling for a long time. And for the first time in 6 years, he wondered. The following Thursday, Darius came home from work to find Adrienne already packing. That was the first thing. She had never packed the night before. She was a morning person. Rushed, efficient. Everything thrown in at the last minute while coffee brewed. But here she was, at 7 in the evening, standing at the foot of the bed, with the carry-on open and her back to the door. He watched her from the hallway for a moment. She pulled open the top dresser drawer, the one in the back, the one she kept her nicer things in, and lifted out a folded set he recognized by color. Black, silk-trimmed. Not the everyday kind. She set them in the bag with a care that was almost gentle. Then she went to the bathroom. He heard the cabinet open, the second shelf, the perfume. He walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water he didn't drink. Friday morning she kissed him at the door. On the mouth this time, which was almost worse. She smelled like the perfume. She was wearing her good earrings, the small gold hoops, not the simple studs she wore to the office. "I'll text you when I land," she said. "Safe flight." He watched her roll the carry-on down the driveway, watched the car back out, watched until the street was empty. Then he went inside and got ready for work. He sat at his desk for 3 hours and did not do one useful thing. He moved papers. He opened emails and read the first sentence and closed them again. He approved a maintenance request he had already approved the week before. Twice, people asked him something, and he answered a second, too late, just slightly off, like a man listening through a wall. At 11:15, his supervisor, Carol, stopped at his office door and said, "You all right, Darius? You look like you're somewhere else." "Just tired," he said. She nodded and moved on. At noon, he submitted a personal leave request. 3 days. He had accrued 41 days of personal leave over 6 years. He had never used any of it. The system approved it automatically. He closed his laptop, picked up his jacket, and walked out to the parking garage. He pulled out his phone and booked the next flight to Charlotte, a 2-hour and change connection out of Memphis International. departing at 3:10. Then he sat in his car and thought for a moment about what he was doing. He was not an impulsive man. Everything in him resisted the move, the part of him that made lists, that verified, that waited for evidence before drawing conclusions. That part told him to go back upstairs, told him the perfume meant nothing, told him the lingerie was just coincidence. But there was another part of him, a quieter, older part. The part that had grown up learning to trust what he observed before anyone told him what to think. That part said, "You already know." He started the car. He remembered the iPad when he was sitting at the gate. They'd bought it 2 years ago for the kitchen counter. Recipes, news, the occasional video. Adrienne had stopped using it almost immediately, preferred her phone for everything. It sat on the counter mostly forgotten, still logged into her accounts because she'd never bothered to change it. He opened the email app, found the booking confirmation 8 minutes into the search. The Kimball Grand, Charlotte. Check-in. Friday. Check-out. Sunday. Confirmation under her name. He stared at the hotel name for a moment. Then he booked himself a room in the same hotel on his company card, closed the app, and put the iPad in his carry-on. The Kimball Grand had a lobby bar with low lighting and long sight lines, the kind of hotel bar designed to make everyone feel like they had somewhere important to be. Dark wood, leather stools, soft light pooling gold on every surface. Darius arrived at 6:15 and took a seat at the far end of the bar with a clear view of the entrance. He ordered a bourbon he didn't taste. He sat the way he always sat, still, unhurried, taking up exactly the space he needed and no more. He didn't have to wait long. She came through the entrance at 6:40. She was wearing the dress, the navy one with the thin straps. The dress she'd told him she was saving for their anniversary dinner in the spring. She was laughing at something, already laughing before she was even fully through the door, and her hand was resting on the arm of a tall man in a charcoal blazer. Easy, like she'd been resting it there for years. Darius recognized the man the way you recognize something you didn't know you were looking for. Tall, polished, the easy confidence of someone who had never had to count anything. They moved to a corner booth. They sat close. At some point, she lifted her fork, something on the end of it, and held it across the table. The man leaned in and took it from her. She smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. Darius picked up his bourbon, set it down without drinking. Then the second man arrived, younger, maybe 30, 33. He came through the entrance with his jacket over his arm, scanning the room, and when his eyes landed on the booth, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to them. Adrienne looked up. She did not tense. She did not look surprised or caught or even startled. She simply slid over and made room, the way you make room for someone you were already expecting. The three of them settled in together. Darius sat at the bar for a long time, long enough that his ice melted and the bourbon went thin and tasteless. He watched without watching, the way he'd learned to observe things without letting his face do anything he'd regret. Then he put $40 on the bar, folded neatly beneath the glass. He walked to the elevator, rode it up in silence, found his room, which was clean and neutral and nothing, and sat down on the edge of the bed in the dark. He did not turn on the light. He sat completely still and let the full weight of what he had just seen settle into him. Slowly, the way something heavy settles when you stop trying to hold it up. Then he made a decision. Not tonight. He would not move tonight. He would build something first. He was at the gate by 6:15. The airport was quiet at that hour. A few travelers with rolling bags, a cleaning crew working the far end of the terminal, the overhead lights still on the dim pre-dawn setting. Darius sat in a plastic chair near the window and watched the tarmac in the gray morning light. His phone buzzed at 8:50. Activation went great. Exhausted LOL. Miss you. He read it once. Then he typed back, "Proud of you. Come home safe." He hit send. Put the phone face down on his knee. Looked back out at the tarmac. The plane was half empty. He had a window seat and no one beside him, which was good, because he needed the quiet. Once they leveled out above the clouds, he opened the Notes app on his phone. He stared at the blank screen for a moment. Then he started writing. Not feelings. He wasn't ready for feelings. Facts. 14 months of second weekend trips. He wrote that first. Then Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, Birmingham, Charlotte again. Dates where he had them. The cities where he didn't. Approximated. He wrote, the Kimball Grand, Charlotte. Booked under her name. Confirmation sent to shared iPad she forgot about. He wrote the man's name. He didn't know it yet, not with certainty. But he'd heard her say it once, maybe 8 months back. A client mention, casual, over dinner. Foster something. He wrote Foster and put a dash after it. He wrote, the dress, navy. Thin straps, the one she was saving. He wrote, the perfume, second shelf. He wrote, the fork. He stopped there for a moment, looked out the window at the white nothing below. Then he wrote, second man, younger, arrived after. She moved over. No surprise. He wrote the second man's face the way he remembered it. The jacket over the arm, the easy scan of the room, the straight line he walked to the booth, like he already knew exactly where he was going. He wrote for 40 minutes. By the time the wheels touched down in Memphis, he had 2 pages. Clean. Precise. No adjectives that weren't necessary. No sentences that weren't true. He read it back once, then locked his phone. He called Walter from the parking garage. He sat in his car with the engine off and the garage quiet around him, and he dialed, and Walter picked up on the second ring. Hey! Walter's voice was easy, unhurried. The voice of a man who had learned a long time ago not to waste energy before he knew what kind of day it was. Darius spoke slowly, and without any of it in his voice. He said what he'd seen. He named the hotel. He described the man, tall, blazer, confident, maybe 40, and the name he half remembered. He described the second man. He mentioned the iPad, the confirmation, the shared account she'd forgotten. There was a pause on Walter's end. Not a long one. Walter wasn't the kind of man who needed long pauses. Tell me what you need, Walter said. Darius told him. Names, background, documentation, a verified file, the kind that would hold up under scrutiny, professional grade, nothing sloppy. Walter was quiet for another second, and then he said, I'll have something for you by Tuesday. Appreciate it. Don't thank me yet, Walter said. Thank me when you're done. Darius hung up. He sat in the garage for another 2 minutes, looking at the concrete pillar in front of his car. Then he started the engine and drove home. He stripped the bed when he got home. He bundled up the sheets, both pillowcases, the duvet cover, and ran them through the wash. While the machine ran, he cleaned the kitchen, reorganized the refrigerator, threw out 2 containers that had been in the back too long. He cooked himself a real meal. Chicken, roasted vegetables, rice done properly on the stovetop. He ate at the kitchen table with a book open beside his plate and the television off. He went to bed at 10, slept clean and dark and uninterrupted. Sunday evening, her car pulled into the driveway at 6:30. He heard the key in the door. He was in the kitchen when she came in. Carry-on behind her, earrings still in, smelling like travel and that perfume. He crossed the kitchen and hugged her. She leaned into it. I'm so tired, she said into his shoulder. Go sit down, he said. I'll open something. He poured 2 glasses of wine, brought them to the living room. She had already kicked off her shoes and pulled her feet up under her on the couch, and she looked comfortable and easy and completely at home. He sat across from her, handed her the glass. Tell me how it went, he said. She told him. He listened. He nodded at the right moments. When she paused, he asked a follow-up question. Which client was this one again? And did the venue work out? And you said they were difficult last quarter. Did that improve? And every question she answered gave her more ground to stand on. And she stood on all of it without hesitation. And he let her. He refilled her glass when it got low. After Adrienne fell asleep, Darius went to his workshop. He sat on the stool by the workbench, with his phone in his hand, and opened the Notes app. He scrolled to the bottom of what he'd written on the plane. Then he added one line. He had spent his whole life holding doors open and saying nothing. He was keeping the door. Walter was already in the booth when Darius arrived. The diner was off Summer Avenue, the kind of place with laminated menus and a coffee machine that had been running since before either of them was born. It wasn't close to Walter's office or Darius's hospital. That was the point. Walter had chosen it, and Walter chose things carefully. He had a folder on the table beside his coffee cup. Nothing written on the outside, just a plain manila folder, sitting there like it was nothing. Darius slid into the booth across from him. The waitress came. Darius ordered coffee. She left. Walter didn't open the folder right away. He took a sip from his cup first, looked out the window at the street, then looked back at Darius. "You sure you want to do this here?" Walter asked. "I can send it." "Here is fine," Darius said. Walter opened the folder. The man's full name was Foster Kimball, 41 years old. Real estate developer, Charlotte-based. Married 11 years. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both in middle school. Darius looked at that detail. Then he moved on. Walter had pulled the billing records through a contact at a business data service. All public-facing, all legal. Adrienne's firm had been contracted to provide marketing services to Kimball's development company for just under 2 years. Active account. Ongoing billing. Her department processed invoices to his company on a quarterly cycle. She had been sleeping with a client whose payments funded her bonuses. Darius read that part twice, not because he didn't understand it, because he wanted to make sure he had it exactly right. "The wife," Darius said. "Isabel Kimball." Walter turned to the next page. "She's got her own career, not in real estate development, but adjacent. Commercial property consulting. 11 years in Charlotte circles. She knows everybody her husband knows." Darius nodded once and said nothing. Walter turned another page. The second man's full name was Brad Okafor, 33, senior account strategist at a firm called Meridian Group, a mid-size marketing agency whose client roster overlapped in 2 places with Adrienne's agency. They had first been introduced at an industry mixer, according to LinkedIn activity Walter had documented. Consistent professional contact over the following months. Walter stopped there. He let Darius read the page. Then he said quietly, "Keep going." Darius turned the page. Walter had pulled the social media archives. 18 months back, Brad Okafor had posted a photo on a Saturday night, a dinner party, group shot, the caption something about good food and good people. He had tagged the location, Darius's address. Darius sat with that for a moment. He remembered the night. He had cooked for 8 people. Lamb chops, roasted garlic potatoes, a salad Adrienne had been on him to make for weeks. He had spent most of the evening in the kitchen. He remembered a younger man near the door at the end of the night. A firm handshake, easy smile. "Thanks for having us, man." Food was incredible. He had said, "Come back any time." The coffee cup in his hand was warm. He set it down. "Okay," he said. Walter closed the folder and slid it across the table. Darius picked it up and put it flat on the seat beside him. They sat for another few minutes. Walter talked about something else, a job he was wrapping up, something about a client in Nashville. Darius listened and answered when it called for it. They split the check. They walked out to the parking lot and said their goodbyes the way they always did. Brief, no performance. Darius drove home. He went to his computer that evening after dinner. He pulled up the household bank account, the joint one, the one they had maintained together since the first year of the marriage. He had always managed it. Adrienne had never been particularly interested in the numbers, which had always struck him as an odd thing for a woman as ambitious as she was. He went back 14 months. He found the first one in March of last year. $280. Cash withdrawal. ATM on Poplar. He almost missed it because it was just under 300. Unremarkable on its own. He kept going. They weren't always the same amount. Some months 300. One month 450. Never more than 500. Never so large or so regular that a person not looking for them would think twice. He got out a notepad and wrote each one down. Date, amount, location of the ATM where he could identify it. When he was done, he added them up. $7,140. He looked at the number for a long time. Then he opened a separate browser window and transferred a matching amount, $7,140, from a private savings account into a new account he had created the previous morning. Adrienne's name was not on it. She had never been told about the private savings account because she had never asked. He closed the browser. He called his attorney from the workshop, standing at the workbench with the lights low. He framed it the way a careful man frames things, hypothetically speaking, a couple in Tennessee, one party suspects the other. What does the law say about asset protection before a filing? The attorney, who had known Darius for 11 years and was not a man easily fooled by framing, answered every question precisely and asked none of his own. They spoke for 20 minutes. Darius thanked him and said they'd get lunch soon. He had bought the safe at a hardware store in Bartlett. Cash, no card. A small fireproof model, gray steel, digital lock. He'd installed it in the workshop himself the Saturday before, bolted it to the floor behind the standing cabinet where he kept his tools. He opened it now. He placed Walter's folder inside, flat against the bottom. Then he closed it, locked it, tested the handle once. He turned the workshop light off, went inside, and went to bed at his normal time. The porch light was already on when Darius pulled up. It was always on after dark. Phyllis had kept it that way for 30 years, through 2 neighborhoods, 3 different houses, and 1 very long life. The light meant the same thing it had always meant. Someone is here. Someone is expected. Come in. He hadn't called. He sat in the car for a moment with the engine off, looking at the yellow glow on the front steps. The neighborhood was quiet. Someone down the block had their television on, blue light flickering through a curtain. A dog barked once and stopped. Darius got out of the car. She opened the door before he reached the porch. She had probably heard the car. Phyllis heard everything. It was one of the things about her that had never changed, not in the 30-odd years Darius had known her. She was 64, short and solid in the way of a woman who had stood in front of classrooms for 4 decades and never once needed to raise her voice to get quiet. She was wearing a house coat and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked at his face. 5 seconds, maybe less. She stepped aside and held the door open. She made sweet tea without asking. He sat at her kitchen table, the same one that had been there since he was a teenager. Dark wood with a small burn mark on one corner from a casserole dish she'd set down too fast one Thanksgiving. She set a glass in front of him and sat down across from him with her own. She didn't ask him anything. She just waited. So he told her. He told her about Walter's comment over beers, about lying awake that first night and not being able to stop thinking, about the packing, Adrienne's bag, the good perfume, the lingerie he recognized because he had been the one to give it to her for her birthday 2 years ago. He told her about Charlotte, about booking the room in the same hotel, about sitting at the bar in his jacket and watching his wife walk in wearing the anniversary dress with her hand on another man's arm, easy, familiar, like she had done it 100 times. He told her about the corner booth, about the fork. He told her about Brad Okafor arriving, about Adrienne making room in the booth, without flinching, without looking up, without any trace of surprise. Then he told her about the dinner party, about cooking lamb chops for 8 people, about a younger man with an easy smile shaking his hand at the front door on the way out. "Thanks for having us, man." Food was incredible. Phyllis's expression didn't change much, but her jaw tightened, just slightly, the way it did when something confirmed what she had already suspected. He told her about the 14 months of withdrawals, about the attorney call, about the safe in the workshop. He told her all of it, not like a man delivering a report, but like a man setting something down that had gotten too heavy to keep carrying the same way. He didn't cry, but his voice went rough in a few places, and he didn't try to smooth it out. This was the only room where he didn't have to. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, wind moved through the trees. Phyllis looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Finish what you started." She wrapped both hands around her glass. "Then call me and I'll cook." That was it. No, have you thought about counseling? No, maybe there's more to the story. No, you need to pray on this. Just finish, then call. He nodded. He meant it. He was about to push back from the table when Phyllis spoke again. "There's something I've been keeping," she said. Her voice was even, but she was looking at the table when she said it. "I want you to have it now." He waited. 2 summers ago, the cookout at Marcus and Renee's. You were on the grill most of the afternoon. She paused. Adrienne and I were sitting by the coolers. We were talking about nothing. I don't even remember how it started. But she said something about you. Phyllis looked up at him. She said you had no ambition, that you were comfortable being average. The kitchen was very still. Darius didn't move. He held the glass of sweet tea with both hands and looked at a spot on the table and sat with those 2 words for a long time. Comfortable being average. Not that the marriage had problems. Not that she was unhappy. Not that she wanted more, or felt lonely, or wished things were different. She had looked at the man who packed her bags without being asked, who managed their finances while she spent freely, who cooked for her friends and shook their hands at his own front door. And she had called him average. Phyllis didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. She had held it for 2 years, and now it belonged to him, and she trusted him to know what to do with it. He finished his tea. He thanked her. He hugged her at the door. She held on a beat longer than usual. And then he walked back down the porch steps to the car. He didn't turn on the radio. The city moved past his windows in the dark. Gas stations, intersections, the long flat stretch of road that ran between Phyllis's neighborhood and his. He drove the speed limit. He kept both hands on the wheel. Average. He thought about the word the entire way home. He turned it over like a stone, looked at every side of it, thought about what it meant that she had said it to Phyllis. Not to him, not in a fight, not in a moment of heat, but casually, at a cookout, while he was 20 feet away cooking food for her family. He thought about everything he had built from nothing, the technical program he had paid for himself, the entry-level facilities job he had taken at 24 and worked into a senior management role over a decade of 7 a.m. mornings, and documented systems that his hospital still used, the private savings account she didn't know about, the fireproof safe in the workshop, the attorney who had answered every question without asking any of his own. He thought about that word the entire way home. When he pulled into the driveway, he cut the engine. He sat for a moment in the quiet car. His jaw was set. His hands were steady. He got out and went inside. The second file arrived on a Thursday. Walter slid it across the same diner table as before. Same corner booth, same bad coffee, same man who didn't say more than necessary. The folder was thicker this time. Darius opened it, without rushing. Phone records cross-referenced with her submitted work calendar, Walter said. He tapped the top page with one finger. Read the dates. Darius read them. The Charlotte activation, the one Adrian had texted him about from the hotel room, the one she had described over Sunday dinner with the kind of easy detail that only a practiced liar can manage, had not taken place in the month she attended. The actual client event had occurred 3 months earlier. It was public record. The client's own website had the recap posted, photos included, dates stamped. Adrian had taken the real event, moved it forward on paper, and filed it as justification for reimbursable travel expenses, hotels, meals, mileage. All of it submitted to her company's accounting department against an event that had already happened and that she had not attended. Darius set the page down flat on the table. "How much?" he asked. "Just under $900. That trip alone." Walter folded his hands around his coffee cup. "But the pattern goes back further if someone wanted to look." Darius nodded slowly. He did not look surprised. He did not look angry. He looked like a man confirming a measurement he had already estimated. Close enough. Now verified. Walter slid a second document across. A printed page with a section near the bottom highlighted in yellow. "Brad Okafor's firm runs a code of conduct," Walter said. "Signs it every year. This section covers personal relationships that create conflicts of interest with client-adjacent contacts." He paused. Adrienne's agency and Brad's firm share 2 overlapping client accounts. They met through professional events on those accounts. Every part of what they did crossed that line. Darius read the highlighted section twice. The language was formal and precise. It left no room for interpretation. He thought about Brad Okafor's easy smile, the firm handshake at the front door. Food was incredible, man. He thought about Brad signing this document, once a year, 4 years in a row, and then doing exactly what it prohibited, using the very professional access it was designed to protect. He closed the folder. "Good work," he said. Walter picked up his coffee. "You need anything else from me right now?" "Not tonight." He read everything again at his workshop table that night, after Adrian had gone to bed. The house was quiet. The workshop light made a small yellow circle over the table. Outside, it had started to rain. A steady, low sound against the roof, the kind that made everything feel sealed and private. He went through it methodically. The photographs from Charlotte, the 14 months of cash withdrawal records from the joint account, the expense report documentation, the original submission, the client's public event recap, the date discrepancy laid out in Walter's clean, precise formatting, Foster Kimball's background file, the copy of Brad's employee handbook with the highlighted section. Each page he read once, set it down, read the next. When he was done, he stacked everything in order, oldest to newest, category by category, and placed it in the fireproof safe. He turned the dial. He checked it twice. Then he sat down at the workshop table with 2 blank envelopes and a legal pad. The first letter took him 40 minutes. It was addressed to Isabel Kimball. He wrote it by hand, then typed it, then read it back once. It was factual, respectful. It contained the photograph from the Charlotte Hotel bar, Foster's arm, Adrian's hand, the corner booth, and a documented timeline of what Walter's research had established. It asked for nothing. It offered no opinion. The last line said only, "You deserve to know. I'm sorry you are reading this." He folded it, placed it in the envelope, and sealed it. The second letter took less time. He had been thinking about it longer. It was addressed to the Human Resources Director at Brad Okafor's firm. He had found the name through the company's public website. The letter was typed, single-spaced, and written in the measured tone of a professional complaint, because that was exactly what it was. It contained the Charlotte photograph, the documented timeline of Brad and Adrienne's professional interactions, and a copy of the highlighted section of Brad's own firm's conduct policy. He had marked the relevant language in the same yellow highlighter Walter had used. He did not ask for any specific action. He did not need to. The evidence was the argument. He trusted that Brad's own employer would read it and arrive where the facts pointed. He folded the letter, placed it with the supporting documents, and sealed that envelope too. He set both of them on the workshop shelf, side by side. Then he sat for a moment and looked at them. Not yet. But the work was done. He turned off the workshop light and locked the door behind him. The house was dark and quiet. He moved through it without turning on any lights. He knew every step of it, every creak in the floor, every turn. He had lived in this house for 4 years. He had painted the hallway himself. He stopped in the bedroom doorway. Adrienne was asleep on her side, facing the window. Her breathing was slow and even. The rain made soft sounds against the glass above her. He looked at her for a moment, just a moment. He did not feel angry. He had expected to. Standing there in the dark, with everything he now held, he had expected some kind of heat. But there was nothing like that. What he felt was quieter than anger and heavier than relief. He felt finished. He walked to his side of the bed and lay down. He stared at the ceiling. The rain kept falling. Adrienne didn't stir. He closed his eyes. The announcement came on a Tuesday. Adrienne walked into the kitchen while Darius was making coffee, already scrolling through something on her phone, and said it the way she always said things that were already decided. Not asking, informing. "I've got Nashville this weekend. The Harmon campaign kickoff. I'll leave Friday morning." "Okay," Darius said. He poured his cup. "How long?" "Back Sunday evening." She glanced up from the phone. "Maybe late." He nodded, took a sip of his coffee. "I'll make sure the car's filled up." She smiled at him. Warm, easy, the smile that used to be the best thing in his world, and went back to scrolling. Friday morning, he carried her bag to the car. It was a cool morning, the kind that made the neighborhood smell like cut grass and rain-soaked concrete. He set the bag in the trunk, while Adrienne checked something on her phone by the driver's side door. She was wearing the kind of outfit she called travel casual, put together in a way that required more effort than she would ever admit to him. "You've got food in the fridge," he said. "Left you a note on the counter." She looked up. For half a second, something moved across her face, something soft and almost guilty. Then it was gone. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said. She kissed him on the cheek, got in the car, pulled out of the driveway. He stood there and watched until she turned the corner. Then he went inside and opened the tracking app on his phone. The GPS unit Walter had installed was clean, legal, and accurate to within 30 feet. Walter had walked Darius through the relevant Tennessee statutes. A spouse could legally track a jointly owned vehicle. The car was in both their names. Everything was documented. Everything was above board. Darius sat at the kitchen table that afternoon and watched the small blue dot move north on the map. He drank his coffee. He watched it park. The address that came back when he searched it was not a conference center. It was not a hotel with a ballroom wing or a business district location. It was a boutique hotel in a quieter part of Nashville, the kind of place with a rooftop bar and $40 cocktails and rooms designed to look like someone's idea of intimacy. The dot did not move again that night. He set the phone face down on the table and picked up the folder his attorney had sent over. He spent 2 hours on the phone with his attorney that same evening, going through the final paperwork line by line the way he went through everything, slowly, completely, without skipping. His attorney had done good work. The asset separation was clean. The documentation was thorough. The filing was ready. Darius initialed where he was supposed to initial. He signed where he was supposed to sign. He took photographs of every page with his phone and put the originals back in the folder. "You sure about the timing?" his attorney asked. "Yes," Darius said. "Okay, I'll file Monday. Thank you." He hung up and checked the tracker. The blue dot hadn't moved. Saturday morning, he drove to the post office. He had both envelopes in a plain paper bag, the kind he used for groceries. He set them on the counter one at a time. He paid for certified mail with delivery confirmation on each. The clerk gave him 2 receipts. He folded them and put them in his wallet. He drove home, made himself breakfast, ate it slowly. He checked the tracker once more. The blue dot sat in the same Nashville parking structure it had occupied since Friday afternoon. He put the phone away and went to the workshop. He had a shelf to put back together. Adrienne returned Sunday evening, just after 7. She came through the door glowing in the specific way she always did after these weekends, rested and bright-eyed, loose in her movements, with the particular ease of someone who has gotten exactly what they wanted. She kissed him on the cheek, dropped her bag by the stairs. "Campaign launch went so well," she said, following him into the kitchen. "The client loved everything. I think we're going to get the full contract extension." "That's great," Darius said. He was plating dinner. She sat down at the table and poured herself a glass of the wine he'd already opened. She talked about Nashville the way she always talked about these trips, with confident, well-constructed detail that sounded like memory, but was built like a script. He let her talk. He served the food. He asked 1 or 2 easy questions and nodded at the answers. Somewhere in the middle of dinner, she set down her fork and said, almost as an afterthought, "I've been thinking about getting a new car. Something with better tech. I was looking at some options." She picked up her wine. "Our savings are finally in good shape. We've worked hard for that." Darius looked at her across the table. "We should sit down and talk about finances," he said. "This weekend, maybe?" She was already reaching for her phone. "Yeah, sure. This weekend." "This weekend," he said again. She didn't look up. He cleared the table after dinner, washed the dishes by hand, the way he preferred, dried them, put them away. Then he went to the workshop. The shelf where the 2 envelopes had sat was empty. He looked at it for a moment. Just bare wood and a faint outline of dust where the paper had been. He opened the safe. Everything inside was ordered, labeled, and waiting. He looked at it once. Then he closed the door, turned the dial, and checked it twice. He turned off the light. Everything was in motion. The kitchen was quiet when Adrienne came downstairs. No coffee smell, no eggs on the stove, no radio. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the sound of morning birds through the window above the sink. Darius was already at the table. He was sitting straight, both hands flat on the surface, a manila folder in front of the chair across from him. He was dressed, not in weekend clothes, but in the kind of quiet, deliberate way that said he had been up for a while. He looked at her when she came in. He didn't smile. "Sit down," he said. Not harsh, just even. Adrienne stopped at the edge of the kitchen. She was in her robe, hair loose, the particular softness of someone who had not yet built themselves into the person they showed the world. She looked at the folder, then at him. "What is this?" "Sit down, Adrienne." She sat. He opened the folder and turned it toward her. He didn't say anything at first. He let her look. The first page was the photograph from Charlotte. Clear and steady. Adrienne in the anniversary dress, her hand on Foster Kimball's arm, the lobby bar behind them in soft gold light. The second page was the GPS log from Nashville. The car's location, time-stamped, the boutique hotel address printed at the top. The third page was a neatly organized table. 14 months of cash withdrawals from their joint savings account. Dates, amounts, a total at the bottom. 7,000 and some change. The fourth page was a copy of the travel expense report Adrienne had filed for Charlotte, beside a printout of the client's actual public event calendar showing the activation had occurred 3 months prior. Adrienne stared at the pages. Her face went through several things very quickly. "This isn't—" She stopped. Started again. "That photo doesn't show what you think it shows. We were at an industry event. He's a client." "You're misreading it. The hotel records show you checked into the same room." Darius said. His voice was calm, completely calm, like a man reading from a prepared document, because that is exactly what he had done. The cash withdrawals, that was for, I was handling something. For my mother. I didn't think I needed to explain every transaction to you. He pulled a second sheet from the folder and set it beside the first. Her mother's bank records, which his attorney had requested through proper channels. No corresponding deposits. Adrian looked at the paper. Her jaw tightened. This is, you went through my things. You tracked my car. Her voice shifted, climbed. You followed me to Charlotte. You had someone, what, spy on me? Who does that? What kind of person does that? She was leaning forward now, both hands on the table, color rising in her face. Anger performed over panic, the way a person attacks when they have nothing left to defend. Darius let her finish. Then he said quietly, a man who needed the truth because the woman who was supposed to tell him wouldn't. The words landed and stayed. Adrienne sat back. The anger folded. She pressed her hand over her mouth, and for a moment she was very still. Then her shoulders came down, and the tears came. Real ones, or real enough, the kind that come when the ground finally gives. I'll end it, she said. Both of them. It's done. I'll end it today, Darius. I swear to you. I know you will, he said. She looked up. Because I already have. He reached into the bag beside his chair and placed a second folder on the table. Thinner than the first. He slid it across to her. She opened it with shaking hands. The divorce papers were neatly organized, each tab marked with a small colored flag, where she would eventually need to respond. At the top, the filing date was printed clearly. 3 days ago, Thursday. The same day the envelopes left the post office. Adrienne stared at the pages for a long time. She didn't speak. There was nothing left to negotiate with, and somewhere underneath everything, she knew it. The papers were already filed. The documentation was already built. There was no version of this conversation where she talked her way back to the beginning. She pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped against the kitchen floor. Loud in the quiet house. She stood, gathered her robe around her, and walked past him without looking at him. Her footsteps went up the stairs. The bedroom door didn't slam. It just clicked shut. Darius sat where he was. He closed the first folder. He closed the second. He placed them both back in the bag and set it on the floor beside his chair. Then he stood up, went to the counter, and made himself a cup of coffee. He filled the machine with water, measured the grounds, waited while it ran. When it was done, he poured a cup and brought it back to the table. He sat down in the same chair. He wrapped both hands around the mug. He drank his coffee slowly, in the quiet kitchen, alone. He heard her through the ceiling, not the words, just the shape of them. The rise and fall of her voice moving from room to room, the long silences that meant someone on the other end was talking, the single sharp sound that might have been a sob or might have been something harder. Darius sat in the living room with a book open in his lap. He wasn't reading it, but he held it, and that was enough. The first call lasted 20 minutes. Her mother, probably. The second was shorter. Her best friend, Camille. He knew the rhythm of those conversations the way you know the sounds of a house you've lived in for 6 years, the creak of the third floorboard, the way the heating vent ticks at 11 in the morning. You learn a place, you learn a person, or you think you do. The third call started around 2 in the afternoon. It was the quietest one. He heard her voice drop. Not crying now, something more focused. The tone of a person who needs something and is calculating how to ask for it. It went on for a while, then it stopped. Not gradually, the way conversations end, abruptly, the way a door closes when the person on the other side has already walked away. Darius turned a page he hadn't read. What he knew, and what Adrian did not know he knew, was that the call to Foster had nowhere to go. Walter had hand-delivered the envelope to Isabel Kimball the previous Thursday. Walter had a way of doing things thoroughly and without drama, and delivering an envelope to a woman at her office in Charlotte was the kind of task he completed without being asked twice. Isabel had opened it that same afternoon. She had confronted Foster Friday night. By Saturday morning, the same morning, Darius laid 2 folders on the kitchen table. Foster Kimball was not a man positioned to rescue anyone. He was standing in his own kitchen in Charlotte, watching his wife read from a printed timeline that Darius had organized with the same care he brought to everything. A real estate developer who had spent 15 years building relationship capital in a city where everyone knew everyone was discovering, in real time, how quickly that capital could be called in. His business partner had been informed of the ethics conflict by noon Friday. The client billing issue, Adrienne's agency charging Foster's company for marketing services throughout the duration of the affair, was not the kind of thing a business partner absorbed quietly. Isabel had already made 2 calls of her own, one to a divorce attorney, one to a woman she had brunch with on the first Saturday of every month, a woman who knew half of Charlotte's real estate circle and who understood, without being told explicitly, what it meant when Isabel Kimball's voice sounded like that on a phone call. Foster's reputation did not collapse all at once. It contracted. Quietly, efficiently, and in the specific way that reputations contract when the people who matter stop returning calls at the same speed they used to. He did not call Adrienne back. He had his own accounting to attend to. Brad Okafor had found out differently. The envelope to his HR director had arrived Friday morning. The firm's compliance review had moved the way compliance reviews move when the evidence is clean and the violation is unambiguous, quickly, and without appetite for nuance. Brad had signed his company's code of conduct every year for 4 consecutive years. The signature was on file. The policy was clear. The documented relationship with a client-adjacent contact, initiated through professional event access and sustained using professional introductions, left no gray area. By end of business Friday, Brad no longer worked there. The firm notified the 2 overlapping clients of a compliance matter as a matter of protocol. They were not told everything, they were told enough. Word moved through the industry in the way that professional information always moves, quietly, from person to person, in the spaces between meetings, until Brad's name carried a weight that had nothing to do with his actual skill, and everything to do with the story that now traveled with it. He sent out 11 applications in the weeks that followed. 4 companies responded. 2 offered interviews. Neither offered a job. Eventually, he accepted a mid-level coordinator position at a small regional firm 2 states away. Half the salary. None of the standing. A city where no one knew him yet, which was the only thing the situation had going for it. Adrienne's own firm received the formal complaint the following week. The falsified expense reports and the client ethics documentation, submitted through Darius's attorney, in Darius's name, with everything attached. The compliance officer opened the review within 24 hours. By Thursday, Adrienne was on administrative leave. That evening, Darius set his book on the coffee table and called Phyllis. She picked up on the second ring. "It's done," he said. A pause. Then, "Come Sunday, I'll cook." "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I'll be there." The drive to the Holloway's house took 40 minutes. Phyllis rode in the passenger seat with her purse in her lap, and her hands folded over it. She had dressed carefully. A navy blouse, pressed slacks, small gold earrings, the kind of outfit that said she was taking this seriously without saying anything at all. She did not ask Darius how he was feeling. She already knew. She watched the highway and let him drive. He had ironed his shirt that morning. Dark gray. No tie. He had eaten breakfast, washed his plate, and dried it by hand before setting it back in the cabinet. He had done everything at his normal speed because there was no reason to rush. The meeting would go the way it would go. He had the folder. He had Phyllis. That was enough. The Holloways lived in a brick ranch house with a well-kept yard on the south side of Memphis. Adrienne's mother, Connie, met them at the door. She was a small woman with Adrienne's cheekbones and careful eyes, and she looked at Darius the way people look at someone they pity and respect at the same time. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course," Darius said. Adrienne was already inside, seated at the dining room table. She had dressed up, full makeup, her hair done, and when Darius came through the door, she looked at him with an expression that was almost composed. Almost. Her father, Randall, stood near the window, 62 years old, a retired Army staff sergeant, a man who had shaken Darius's hand at the wedding and told him to take care of his daughter. He nodded once when Darius came in. That was all. Adrienne's younger sister, Kezia, was at the far end of the table, 28, softer than Adrienne, already red around the eyes. Darius sat down. Phyllis sat beside him and placed her purse on the floor and said nothing. Connie spoke first. "We all love you both," she said, "and we believe that with counseling, with the right kind of help, two people who built something together can find their way back." Randall cleared his throat. "Every marriage hits a wall. Every single one. What matters is that you don't walk away before you've done the work." Kezia looked at her hands. "She made a mistake, Darius. She knows that. She's hurting, too." Darius let them finish. He did not nod or shake his head. He simply waited, the way a man waits when he is not uncertain, and when the room went quiet, he reached into the bag at his feet and brought out the folder and set it on the table. "I want to show you something," he said. "Not to cause any of you pain, but because I think you deserve to know what happened in full." He opened it. He walked them through it the same way he had walked Adrienne through it the previous Saturday, calmly, in order, without raising his voice. The Charlotte photograph, the Nashville GPS log, the financial withdrawals over 14 months, the falsified expense reports, Foster Kimball, named, Brad Okafor, named. When he mentioned Brad, he let the next sentence sit on its own. "Brad Okafor attended a dinner party at our home 18 months ago. I cooked for 8 people that night. He shook my hand at the door on his way out. The room was very quiet. Randall Holloway set down his coffee cup. He looked at his daughter for a long moment, not with anger exactly, something more final than anger. Then he stood up, walked down the hall, and closed a door behind him. Connie pressed her fingers against her mouth. She did not look at Adrienne. Kezia was crying, her shoulders pulled in small and tight. Adrienne had been watching the table through most of it. Now she looked up. Her eyes were dry. Something behind them had shifted. The composure she'd constructed that morning was still there, but it had changed shape. It wasn't dignity anymore. It was just the thing that was left after everything else had been stripped away. "I just felt like I was settling," she said. The words came out flat, not cruel, not a performance, just the truest thing she had said in a very long time. Darius looked at her for a moment. He nodded, slowly, once, the way a man nods when something he suspected has just been confirmed out loud. "Thank you for your time," he said. He was speaking to the room, to Connie and Kezia. "I mean that." He picked up the folder, put it back in his bag, and stood. Phyllis was already on her feet, her purse in hand, her face still and composed. They walked to the door. Darius opened it and held it for her. In the car, Phyllis reached over and placed her hand on top of his, where it rested on the center console. She didn't say anything. She looked straight ahead at the road. He pulled out of the driveway and drove. 14 months later, Darius Webb was standing in the hallway of a building he owned. It was a small commercial property, single-story, clean lines, good bones, that he had purchased 8 months after the divorce finalized. He had paid for it with money Adrienne had never known about. Money saved in the quiet years she had written off as ordinary. His facilities consulting firm occupied 2 of the offices. His first 2 clients were hospital systems. His third was the city. Phyllis had framed the first signed contract and hung it in her living room without asking his permission. He had seen it on Sunday and hadn't said a word, because there was nothing to say. Walter was his first business partner. It was the most natural thing in the world. The house Darius lived in now was smaller than the one he had shared with Adrienne. He had chosen it that way. It had a workshop with room to breathe, a kitchen that got good light in the morning, and a yard that was completely, entirely his. He cooked on Sundays. He read in the evenings. He moved at his own pace through his own days, and there was no one in the house performing comfort or managing his awareness of their unhappiness. He was not reconstructing anything. He was just living. Adrienne's compliance review had ended the way it was always going to end. The falsified expense reports, layered on top of the client ethics violation, had made her position untenable. She had relocated to Atlanta 6 months after the termination, a city where her reputation had not yet arrived before her. The reset was slow, humbling in the specific way that resets are humbling when you cannot pretend the reason for them was outside your control. She called her mother every Sunday. She did not call Darius. Foster Kimball had lost majority ownership of a development project in the divorce proceedings. Isabel had kept the house, the connections, and the standing in Charlotte's real estate circle that had always been half hers to begin with. Foster had kept the debt and a smaller office, and the particular silence of a man who had believed money was armor, and discovered it was not. Brad Okafor was 2 states away. He went to work early at a company that did not know his name 6 months ago, and he kept his head down, and he rebuilt in the only direction available to him, which was forward, from a starting point that offered very little in the way of cushion. Some reckonings don't arrive with noise. They simply arrive. Darius was at his kitchen table on a Tuesday morning when the text came through. He was reviewing a contract, third-party maintenance services for one of the hospital accounts. His coffee was still warm. The window above the sink showed a backyard in early fall, the trees just beginning to turn. His phone buzzed on the table. Walter. First check cleared. We're real now. Darius read it once, set the phone face down on the table. He picked up his coffee. He looked out the window at the yard, at the leaves, at the clean October light settling over everything that was his. He took a breath, and for the first time in a long time, it cost him nothing. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.